One of the most famous hip-hop artists of the 1990s, Heavy D, whose real name was Dwight Arrington Myers, has just passed away. What's notable is that before his death, Heavy D was working on a book. Kim Porter, who had ties to Sean Diddy Combs, was also writing a book before she suddenly passed away. Albie Sure was working on a documentary about his life. You know, there are poisons that can create symptoms similar to a heart attack or pneumonia, and when they're used, the death appears natural. And that's exactly what they told us, a medical complication, just bad timing. But something about Heavy D's death doesn't sit right. When you look closely at the timing, the people he was around, and what he was working on before he died, the picture starts to change. What all of them had in common, the survivors and the ones who passed, all connected to Uptown Records, was that they were preparing to tell the truth, whether through books or documentaries. Heavy D had just returned to the stage with a memorable performance, one that people kept talking about. And just a few days later, he was gone. After that, whispers began to surface, very quiet, very discreet, about pressure, about forced silence, and the price of trying to step away from a powerful system. Then, those closest to one of the biggest music empires started to disappear one by one. Until only one man remained. Puffy, or Sean Diddy Combs, has he ever been in a coma? Has anything strange ever happened to him? Apparently not. He seems to be the luckiest man alive, because nearly everyone who worked at Uptown Records from the very beginning is gone. So the question is, was it all just coincidence? Or is there something deeper we've all been missing, something they don't want you to ask about, and definitely don't want you to know? A sudden collapse or a silencing? They said it was a pulmonary embolism, a sudden blood clot in the lungs. Just an unfortunate medical event after a long flight. That's the story they gave us when Heavy D, one of hip-hop's most beloved, joyful, and unproblematic figures, was found collapsed outside his Beverly Hills condo in November 2011. But when you take a closer look at the circumstances, the timing, the people around him, the strange patterns, the official story begins to crack. And what remains is a trail of secrets, silence, and uncomfortable questions. Heavy D had just returned to the stage after 15 years. He performed in London at a Michael Jackson tribute concert, and fans embraced him warmly. Just weeks earlier, he had lit up the BET Hip Hop Awards with a medley of his greatest hits. He was glowing, smiling, full of life. Leave it up to me, I closed the whole damn store on you. And then, just days later, he was gone. According to the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office, Heavy D died of a pulmonary embolism, most likely caused by deep vein thrombosis, DVT, from a blood clot that formed during his flight back from London. He also had heart disease and reportedly pneumonia, though the coroner claimed it didn't contribute to his death. There was cough syrup in his system, but not in dangerous amounts. A clean, scientific, and logical report. But for many who knew him, or even just followed the music industry, it didn't sit right. Not the suddenness, not the timing, not the eerie similarities to other cases involving people linked to Uptown Records. Heavy D was writing a book before he died. Kim Porter was working on a book before she passed. Albie Sure was producing a documentary about his life. These weren't just creative projects, they were testimonies. And reportedly, Heavy D's book was a tell-all, possibly exposing powerful industry figures, including Diddy. If that sounds far-fetched, consider this: Andre Harrell, founder of Uptown Records and the man who gave Heavy D his big break, also died of a heart attack. Kim Porter, Diddy's ex and longtime confidant, died with pneumonia-like symptoms. There are claims that her initial coroner's report labeled her death a homicide, only to be quietly revised later. Then there's Albie Sure, another Uptown artist, who slipped into a coma shortly after announcing his documentary. He only recently came out of it. That's 4 people, all tied to the same label, the same inner circle, and one powerful mogul, gone or nearly gone in just a few years. And all of them were either preparing to speak out, return to the public eye, or tell their truth. When you put it all together, it's hard not to ask, what really happened to Heavy D? This wasn't just another celebrity tragedy. This was a man who had changed his life. He lost over 135 pounds, became a father, rejected shady deals, and lived with purpose. No history of drug abuse. No clear signs of illness. No warning for those closest to him. And then, he was found face down on a walkway at 44 years old, with new projects in motion and a new chapter just beginning. The official report says it was his body that gave out. But the whispers, especially from industry insiders, suggest it might have been something else entirely. The rumors they tried to bury. As soon as the news of Heavy D's death broke, the media scrambled to explain it, a pulmonary embolism, they said. A sudden blood clot caused by a long flight. A freak medical event. That was the official story. But the public wasn't buying it. Because when someone dies that suddenly, that young, with so much still ahead of them, people start asking questions. And the questions came quickly. The first wave of speculation centered around finances, life insurance, and possible monetary motives. Some insiders whispered that there were undisclosed policies, large ones, and potential beneficiaries who stood to gain a lot from Heavy D's death. He had assets, royalty streams, and a Beverly Hills condo. More importantly, he wasn't just a performer, he was a respected industry executive, someone who knew where the bodies were buried. Then, the theories turned darker. Some believed he had been poisoned, that the blood clot wasn't natural, but the result of something slipped into his system, a substance designed to mimic natural symptoms without leaving a trace. Jaguar Wright wasn't the only one to hint at this, but she was the loudest. She made it clear, people like Heavy D don't just die on their own, not when they're writing books, not when they're preparing to expose everything they know. They have poisons that create heart attack and pneumonia-like symptoms, she said. At the same time, other theories began to circulate, possibly planted by those who wanted to damage his legacy, claiming he died of an overdose or a hidden addiction. But the toxicology report told a different story. No illegal drugs. No alcohol. Just over-the-counter cough syrup, and not in a lethal dose. Still, the rumors didn't die. Some questioned whether there was medical negligence, that when Heavy D collapsed outside his home, help didn't arrive quickly enough. That emergency services were delayed, that the care he received afterward was subpar. There was never a full investigation into the response timeline. But when added to all the other strange details, it only added more fuel to a growing fire. Then came the psychological theories, stress, pressure, burnout. Some said the weight of his comeback, the performances, the unfinished book, and the backdoor power struggles had taken a toll. That the smile he wore on stage masked deep exhaustion. That the industry he helped build was now working against him. Others took it further, into the realm of street politics. They suggested that maybe, just maybe, Heavy D had reconnected with people from his early days, people who didn't want him to rise again. People who felt betrayed, abandoned, or silenced. And finally, there were whispers about concealed health problems, that Heavy D had known something was wrong for a while and kept it private. Maybe out of pride. Maybe fear. Or maybe because he knew the moment the industry sensed weakness, it would use it against him. But what truly propelled all these theories forward was the pattern, because Heavy D wasn't the only one from Uptown Records to die under strange circumstances. He wasn't the only one close to Diddy who passed suddenly. And he wasn't the only one writing a book. Step back and the coincidences stop looking like coincidences. It feels like everyone who worked at Uptown Records from the very beginning is gone. Heavy D, Kim Porter. Andre Harrell, gone. Al B, sure, nearly gone. All linked by a label, a legacy, and a man who still walks free. Was it just the music industry? Was it just bad luck? Or was it something deeper, darker, and intentional? Because from this point forward, it becomes harder and harder to look away. Diddy's shadow over everything. The elephant in the room, Diddy. And that's exactly where this story leads next. At this point, it's impossible to talk about Heavy D's death without mentioning Diddy. Not just because they worked together. Not just because they both came up under Uptown Records. But because every time someone close to Diddy dies suddenly, one name keeps resurfacing, Diddy himself. Let's start with the facts. Heavy D wasn't just another artist signed to Uptown Records. He was part of the foundation, one of the originals. He gave the label its credibility and its crossover appeal in the late 80s and early 90s. He wasn't just talent, he had influence. He helped shape Uptown. And when Andre Harrell gave a young intern named Sean Combs a shot in the early 90s, it was reportedly Heavy D who vouched for him. Without Heavy D, there might be no Diddy. That's how deep their roots go. But what happens when the student surpasses the teacher? Over time, Diddy's rise came at the cost of many, including those who gave him his first breaks. People who didn't always agree with the way he operated once he held power. While many of them faded from the spotlight, Diddy only grew bigger, richer, and more untouchable. And that's why people are starting to look back and ask, why is it that everyone around him keeps dying? Jaguar Wright didn't mince words. She laid it out plainly. Heavy D was working on a tell-all book. So was Andre Harrell. So was Kim Porter. All of them died under suspicious circumstances. Even Al B. Sure, who had just started filming a documentary about his life, suddenly slipped into a coma in 2022, out of nowhere. And once again, there was a connection to Diddy. It's true that Heavy D and Diddy had drifted apart in later years. But it's also true they had unresolved matters, personal and professional. In his final years, Heavy D was moving independently. He started his own label, took full creative control, and rejected lucrative offers from major record companies. Word was, he was done playing the game. And in a world where control is currency, that independence, that separation, can be dangerous. Here's what they all had in common, those who survived and those who didn't, from the Uptown Records circle. They were all writing tell-all books. According to Jaguar and others, Heavy D was preparing to expose the truth about Uptown, about the music industry, about Diddy. And if that's true, even in part, then his death becomes more than just a tragedy, it becomes strategic. What makes it all even murkier is the silence from Diddy's side. There was no heartfelt public tribute to Heavy D, no strong acknowledgement of their shared history. Just silence. A chilling silence, as if none of it had ever happened. Then there's Kim Porter, the mother of Diddy's children. She also died of pneumonia. But according to Jaguar Wright and people close to the family, her original coroner's report indicated toxins in her body and even labeled her death a homicide before it was quietly revised and buried. Like Heavy D, Kim Porter was reportedly working on a memoir. A book that might have revealed the truth behind the mogul. And like Heavy D, she never got to finish it. At this point, it's no longer about conspiracy. It's about consistency, a repeated pattern. People tied to Diddy, trying to tell their stories, and dying before they can. And Jaguar's question still lingers, why is it that nothing ever seems to happen to Diddy? He's surrounded by death. Surrounded by scandal. Surrounded by people collapsing, disappearing, or vanishing from the spotlight. Yet Diddy remains untouched. Richer than ever. More powerful than ever. Hosting parties, leading award shows, living life as if he's untouchable. But now, that invincibility is starting to crack. With recent lawsuits, witness testimonies, and disturbing old videos resurfacing online, the public is connecting the dots. The legacy that once seemed bulletproof is now under fire. And it's not just about the deaths. It's about how people act when they're around Diddy. The fear. The silence. The pain. The stories that don't make sense, but also can't be ignored. Heavy D's death might have only been the beginning the legacy Heavy D tried to protect. Heavy D's death may have been labeled as natural, but the web surrounding it is anything but. Long before the whispers, the rumors, and the conspiracy theories about foul play, Heavy D was building something real, something rooted in joy, honesty, and love. His music radiated positivity. In an era dominated by gangster rap and street beefs, he stood out. He kept his lyrics clean, his message uplifting, and most importantly, he stayed true to himself. Born Dwight Arrington Myers in Jamaica and raised in Mount Vernon, New York, Heavy D wasn't what the world expected from a rapper. He wasn't flashy or aggressive. He was warm, lighthearted, and fun-loving, and he brought all of that into his art. Alongside his group, Heavy D and the Boys, he released 5 studio albums under Uptown Records, delivering classics like We Got Our Own Tang, Somebody for Me, and Now That We Found Love. Then in 2000, his life shifted again. He became a father. His daughter, Z, born to celebrity chef Antonia LaFaso, became the center of his world. He restructured his priorities, lost over 135 pounds, and stepped into acting with appearances in Boston Public, The Tracy Morgan Show, and Law and Order, SVU. He didn't leave music because he failed, he left because he had outgrown it. He told Consciousness magazine he had a vault full of unreleased songs but refused to put anything out unless it met his personal standards. According to his brother and manager Floyd Myers, Heavy D was selective and principled, turning down massive deals if something didn't feel right. But eventually, the music called him back. In 2008, he released Vibes, a reggae-inspired album that earned him another Grammy nomination. Then in September 2011, just months before his death, he released Love Opus under his own independent label, Stride Entertainment. He was finally his own boss again. "I'm the captain of my own ship," he told Billboard. He was preparing for second act performances, books, full creative freedom. But on November 8, 2011, that journey ended abruptly on a walkway outside his home. Yet the story didn't stop there. In fact, what came after revealed a different kind of betrayal, one that didn't come from the industry, but from inside his own family. In May 2013, nearly 2 years after his death, Floyd Myers filed to become the executor of Heavy D's estate. He presented a will dated June 23, 1999, leaving everything to him. Not to Heavy D's daughter. Not to his parents. Just Floyd. The will was signed and notarized, but it was also written before Z was even born. At first, no one challenged it, not even Antonia. The family agreed to let Floyd manage the estate for now, under the understanding that all assets, royalties, pensions, and Social Security would go to Z when she came of age. But that didn't happen. Floyd sold Heavy D's Beverly Hills condo for $1.7 million. After paying off the mortgage and fees, the estate received $140,000, which Floyd split evenly. He took $140,000 as a co-owner. Z received only $17,000. And Floyd wasn't done. He also paid himself $20,000 as executor and began dipping into the estate's funds for personal use, buying appliances, paying bills, and covering household costs the court had already rejected. Eventually, Antonia sensed something was wrong. She demanded access to the records. What she found was alarming: over $100,000 missing, with no explanation of where it went or why. Floyd was treating the estate like his personal account. Despite only owning 50% of the condo, he was using 100% of the estate's funds, and not a cent more went to his niece. In March 2020, a judge intervened. Floyd was removed as executor and ordered to turn over all documents and assets. Antonia was appointed to take control, and from that point on, she ensured that Z received 100% of her father's royalties and long-term assets. Heavy D's death took away an icon. But what happened next nearly robbed his daughter of her future. And from the suspicious nature of his passing, to the silence from those who once sang his praises, to the missing money, one painful question remains: did someone want Heavy D gone, not just to silence him, but to take everything he left behind? The final curtain call. But maybe it wasn't just about silencing him. Maybe it was about taking what he left behind. If there's one thing everyone seems to agree on, it's this: Heavy D didn't look like a man on the verge of dying. In fact, he looked better than he had in years, leaner, healthier, more confident. After nearly a decade away from music, he had returned to the stage with renewed purpose. He still had something to prove. And more importantly, he still had something to say. In October 2011, just 1 month before his death, Heavy D gave what would become his final performance, a high-energy medley at the BET Hip Hop Awards. For many fans, it was like welcoming back an old friend. He smiled. He danced. He rapped with the same effortless charm. He owned the stage like he had never left it. Just weeks before that, he traveled to London to perform at a Michael Jackson tribute concert, a major moment on an international stage. He was giving interviews, holding press events, discussing future projects. He was building something again, slowly, but steadily. Then came the return flight. Doctors say long flights can increase the risk of deep vein thrombosis, which is what the coroner cited as the cause of the pulmonary embolism that killed him. But people close to Heavy D weren't convinced. He had been active, cautious, deeply committed to his health. He was focused. He had projects in motion, including a book that was never completed. On November 8, 2011, Heavy D collapsed outside his Beverly Hills condo. He was rushed to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, where he was pronounced dead. Just like that, gone at 44. But the true heartbreak didn't stop at the loss. It deepened with the silence that followed. There was no major industry tribute. No justice for the mismanagement of his estate. No public words from those who owed him so much, including Diddy. So maybe this wasn't just a case of a man dying too soon. Maybe it was something darker, a quiet erasure. Like so many others who tried to speak up, who tried to take back control, who wanted to leave behind more than just music. They wanted to leave the truth. And truth always makes someone uncomfortable. Anyway, that's it for this story. Thanks for listening.